Have you ever had one of those moments where you know you've come up with a really great idea, a truly original idea, and you're excited to share it, but when you do, it just doesn't land?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Like maybe it's met with silence, or maybe a polite dismissal, or maybe even outright disagreement.
Hmm.
Well, it turns out that experience is not unique to us. And in fact, today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of creativity research to explore how some very significant insights have faced that very same uphill battle.
That's right. We'll be focusing on the work of E. Paul Torrance, who's considered one of the real pioneers in understanding creativity.
Right.
Over his incredible 46-year career, he uncovered some really profound truths about the nature of creativity. And in a very compelling 1995 paper that you shared with me, he outlined several of these discoveries that, for various reasons, were questioned, rejected, or simply overlooked.
And these weren't minor suggestions or tweaks to existing theories.
No, not at all.
Torrance's work has really shaped a lot of how we think about creativity, and yet, as we'll see, some of his most powerful insights really struggled to gain acceptance at the time.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And so our goal today is to unpack a few of these thought-provoking ideas, look at the evidence that he gathered, and maybe get a better understanding of why they weren't more widely embraced when he first put them forward.
It's going to be really interesting to kind of retrace his steps and see how these ideas evolved over time. What I think immediately strikes you when you start delving into Torrance's work is his incredible range of curiosity
Right.
and his willingness to challenge those long-held and deeply ingrained assumptions about how our minds work, how we learn, how we create.
Hmm.
He wasn't just tweaking existing theories. He was really digging deep into fundamental assumptions.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So, one of Torrance's crucial early insights was the immense power of passion in driving creative success. He observed very early on that being truly in love with what you do isn't just beneficial, it's kind of like a fundamental engine for groundbreaking work.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is how he started exploring this. Way back in 1958, he initiated these long-term studies, what we now call longitudinal studies, where he would simply ask elementary school kids what they were passionate about.
Okay.
It might seem obvious to us now, but at the time, the idea that young children could have such strong and lasting interests was considered unthinkable.
Unthinkable, like they didn't really have the capacity to know what they truly loved or were interested in at that young age.
Exactly. The prevailing belief was that kids' interests are fleeting, they change all the time, and that they don't really have a solid sense of what they want to do or be in the long run.
Interesting.
But Torrance followed these children over many years. He tracked their development, and his findings were quite clear. A significant number of them absolutely did know what they loved, and they had identified it themselves early on. And then, as adults, they were actively pursuing those passions in creative ways.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a passing fancy. These early passions had a real and lasting impact on their lives.
So the key insight here is that identifying and pursuing your passions early on, even as a child, isn't just a nice idea. It can actually be a very powerful predictor of future creative success.
Absolutely. Even if traditional wisdom at the time doubted that children could have such lasting interests. And that's a really crucial point here.
Mm-hmm.
Torrance was challenging that established way of thinking.
Right.
And this is a theme that ran throughout his entire career. This willingness to question the status quo and look for deeper, more nuanced understandings of creativity.
So it's interesting that for a long time, this pretty fundamental connection between passion and creativity, this idea that's so intuitive to many of us, especially I think for anyone who's listening who is a creative individual, you know that to do good work, you have to love what you're doing.
Right, yeah.
But it's interesting that this was largely ignored within the field of creativity research for a while.
It really is. It's a reminder that sometimes even those seemingly obvious truths, if they challenge those prevailing assumptions, it can take a while for them to be embraced.
Right.
And what's also interesting here is that later on, Teresa Emabil, who's another very prominent researcher in creativity, known for her work on the social psychology of creativity, she independently arrived at the exact same conclusion.
Right.
She emphasized this idea of labor of love as essential for creative achievement.
Right.
And when she presented her findings, they were much more readily accepted.
It really makes you wonder about the timing of these things.
That does, doesn't it?
Like the same core idea, different researchers, different era, and a vastly different reception. So for you listening to this, especially if you're interested in getting knowledge quickly and applying it effectively, this highlights a potential shortcut. Really tuning into what genuinely motivates you, what sparks your passion, could be a critical key to unlocking your own creative potential.
That's a fantastic takeaway. It's about recognizing the passion isn't just a nice to have, it's actually a key ingredient in the creative process. And that's something that Torrance was emphasizing from very early on.
So, moving on, another really compelling area that Torrance explored was the significant role our mindset plays when we're processing information. So, he discovered that if you approach reading or learning with a creative mindset, you are significantly more likely to then use that information in a creative way.
Right, it's not just about what you know, it's about how you approach the information that you're taking in.
Yeah.
And he even conducted experiments with his colleagues that supported this finding. I remember reading about this study where he had groups of people read the same passage of text, but with different instructions. One group was told to read it with a focus on memorization, while the other group was told to read it with a focus on generating new ideas. And then afterwards, they were given a creativity test.
Yeah.
And guess what? The group that had read with that creative mindset, they actually performed significantly better on the creativity test. They were able to come up with more original and useful ideas based on the information that they had read. It's really quite amazing. It suggests that the way we approach learning can have a profound impact on our ability to think creatively.
And what I find really interesting about this is that despite this evidence, this pretty compelling evidence, Torrance's work in this area didn't initially garner much attention or practical application.
It's true. I mean, his research consistently pointed to the power of a creative mindset in information processing, but this insight wasn't widely adopted or even seriously considered by many in the field at the time. And it makes you wonder, why?
Right, and then in a way, history seems to have kind of repeated itself because later Ellen Langer, whose work on mindfulness and mindlessness became quite well known. I mean, her work was featured on Oprah. She had books on the New York Times bestseller list, so she was really influential.
Oh, yeah.
But she was essentially describing a phenomenon very much in line with what Torrance had identified much earlier. She was talking about the importance of being present, actively engaged, and challenging assumptions when you interact with information. And her ideas resonated very strongly with a much broader audience. So it kind of makes you think, why did it take so long for this idea to really catch on?
Yeah, and it really highlights the importance of timing and framing when it comes to the acceptance of new ideas. Sometimes, even if an idea is well supported, like in this case with Torrance's work, and potentially transformative, it can take a while for the world to be ready for it.
Right. And it underscores how crucial it is to not be discouraged if your ideas aren't immediately embraced. Sometimes you have to keep refining them, keep finding new ways to communicate them, and keep putting them out there until they find their audience. And that can be a really challenging process, but it can also be incredibly rewarding.
I agree. And I think it speaks to the importance of perseverance and resilience for anyone who's trying to make a meaningful contribution in any field. Because often the most groundbreaking ideas are the ones that initially face the most resistance.
Okay, let's shift gears now and delve into one of Torrance's insights that really challenges a very deeply ingrained principle. This is the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. So Torrance proposed that we should treat others not just as we would want to be treated, but also as they want to be treated.
That's an interesting twist on a very familiar concept.
Right. It sounds simple, but it actually has some pretty profound implications.
What's fascinating about this insight is the diverse range of influences that shaped Torrance's thinking. He drew upon concepts like Moreno's role reversal in psychodrama, the profound wisdom in the American Indian prayer about truly understanding another person by walking in their moccasins, and Harry Stack Sullivan's theories on how misunderstandings in relationships often stem from misaligned perceptions.
Right. So he was really synthesizing these diverse perspectives into this very powerful challenge to a seemingly universal principle.
Exactly. He was going beyond just saying, hey, we should be nice to each other. He was digging deeper into the complexities of human interaction and recognizing that treating someone well doesn't always mean treating them the way you would want to be treated.
Right. And he had some very compelling examples to illustrate this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you remember the story of the incredibly gifted 17-year-old boy who was just deeply passionate about science?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a really striking case.
He excelled in science in elementary school and was so eagerly looking forward to taking science courses in high school. But when he tried to register, his counselor flat out refused to enroll him in the general science course.
Can you believe that?
No, I mean, they deemed it too difficult for him, even though he had a demonstrable passion and ability in science.
Right.
His brother and his mother tried to advocate for him, but the counselor was just stuck in this preconceived notion of what was best for this young man.
Right. It's like they were so focused on what they thought was in his best interest that they completely disregarded his actual desires and capabilities.
Right, they were applying a blanket rule instead of really seeing him as an individual.
Exactly.
Fortunately, the young man connected with a science professor at a nearby college who recognized his potential, and through that connection, he was eventually able to get access to the science courses he wanted, and he absolutely flourished. He ended up winning a very significant scholarship. So this really highlights the danger of applying a blanket rule.
Absolutely. Assuming that we know what's best for someone without really taking the time to understand their individual desires and capabilities can have really negative consequences.
Do you remember the anecdote from Japan about a student who had been labeled as having limited cognitive ability?
Oh, yeah, yeah, that one really stuck with me too.
But he showed this very keen interest in physics, and the principal, who seemed like a very open-minded individual, decided to allow him to enroll in a regular physics class just to see what would happen. And remarkably, the student not only kept up with the class, but he excelled. He ended up leading the class and prompting a reevaluation of his cognitive abilities.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of how sometimes all it takes is someone to believe in us and give us a chance to prove ourselves.
Right, and it's a powerful illustration of the limitations of labels and the self-fulfilling prophecies they can create. And then there was Peggy Noonan, the renowned speechwriter who worked for both Presidents Reagan and Bush. She observed that the real creative challenge wasn't figuring out what they wanted to say, it was figuring out how they wanted to say it.
That's so insightful. It's about understanding the nuances of their individual communication styles, not just delivering the message in a generic way.
Right. So Reagan, for example, really favored a very direct, declarative style, while Bush often preferred a more nuanced, less defined approach.
Uh-huh.
So Noonan had to adapt her creative process to each president's unique way of communicating. She couldn't just apply a standard set of good speechwriting rules. It demanded a much higher level of creative thinking and a deeper understanding of the individual she was writing for.
Yeah, she had to go beyond just the content of the speech and really tap into the essence of the person delivering it.
And this really underscores Torrance's point about the limitations of the golden rule. Sometimes treating someone as they want to be treated requires a greater degree of empathy, careful observation, and a willingness to move beyond that one-size-fits-all mentality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It demands more creativity than simply adhering to that traditional notion of treating others as you would want to be treated.
Yeah.
And as Torrance argued, it often leads to far more positive and satisfying outcomes for everyone involved.
Okay, now this leads us to another deeply ingrained idea that Torrance really challenged. And that is the widely accepted notion that past performance is the best predictor of future performance.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is a big one, and it's a belief that's so deeply embedded in our systems, from how we evaluate students to how we make hiring decisions, even to how we perceive individuals who have faced setbacks.
Yeah, it's almost taken as an article of faith, isn't it?
It really is.
It's applied across so many different domains.
Yeah.
I mean, Torrance even recounted some stories from World War II where soldiers who had struggled earlier in their service, they would be transferred to new units and they would actually perform exceptionally well. That is, until their past records caught up with them.
Interesting.
And then those pre-existing perceptions would often undermine their current efforts. It's like their past was always hanging over them.
It's almost like they're being judged based on their past selves rather than their current capabilities.
Exactly. And Torrance argued that this was incredibly unfair and that it could actually prevent individuals from reaching their full potential.
And he observed a very similar pattern in a program designed to help high school dropouts. So these students, they thrived in the supportive and encouraging environment of the program. They were making real progress. But then when they returned to their regular classrooms, they often regressed because their teachers just couldn't seem to let go of their past perceptions of these students.
It's like they were stuck in that old way of thinking.
Right. And so, despite their demonstrated growth and change, the teachers continued to treat them based on their previous failures, and this actually created an environment where they were more likely to struggle again. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
It shows how powerful those expectations can be, even when they're based on outdated information.
And then there's the really compelling example from the University of Georgia Graduate School.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
They implemented a policy that allowed them to admit students as unclassified postgraduates
Hmm.
based on a more holistic evaluation. So they would consider their future career aspirations, their level of motivation, their commitment, even if they didn't fully meet the traditional GPA and standardized test score requirements.
So they were looking beyond just those traditional metrics of academic achievement.
Right. And initially, the dean of the graduate school had some real reservations about this.
Really?
They felt that too many students were being admitted through this alternative pathway.
Hmm.
But Torrance actually analyzed the data and discovered a very surprising trend. So the students who had been admitted based on these non-standard criteria actually had statistically significantly lower GPAs upon initial admittance compared to those admitted through the traditional metrics.
So they were coming in with lower grades.
Lower grades.
But I'm guessing that's not the end of the story.
You're right. Their professional achievements and positions after graduation were just as successful as those who had been admitted based solely on those traditional academic criteria.
So they were catching up and even surpassing their peers who had come in with higher GPAs.
That alone is quite revealing. It really suggests that there are factors beyond past academic performance that play a crucial role in long-term success.
And that makes perfect sense when you think about it, because in the real world, it's not always the people with the highest grades who are the most successful.
Right. It's the people with the drive, the passion, the resilience, and the ability to connect with others and build relationships.
Right, and those are qualities that aren't always reflected in a GPA.
Okay, so the long-term outcomes were even more remarkable because when Torrance looked at the group of 10 students admitted under these non-standard criteria over a longer period of time, this small cohort included presidents of national organizations, the founder of a major creativity association, highly published authors, influential department heads, and other truly distinguished individuals. So their achievements far surpassed those of a comparable group who had been admitted strictly based on their past academic records.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful argument for considering those less tangible factors, those qualities that aren't always easily measured.
And Torrance recognized the importance of these more forward-looking qualities and actually dedicated years to trying to develop methods for measuring what he called this future image. He experimented with various approaches, including asking individuals to describe their future selves through imaginative and realistic scenarios, analyzing the future orientation expressed in their responses to creativity tests, examining the consistency of their childhood career aspirations, even utilizing biographical questionnaires.
So he was really trying to get at those deeper motivations and aspirations that drive people forward.
Right, and while his efforts to measure this future orientation yielded positive and statistically significant results, he acknowledged that much more research was needed.
That's often the case in science, isn't it? You make a discovery and then it opens up a whole new set of questions.
Right, and it's a reminder that sometimes the most crucial aspects of human potential are the most difficult to quantify.
Yes, absolutely. I think this section really speaks to that desire for surprising information and challenges to established beliefs.
Yeah, it really makes you rethink how we assess potential and how we think about success.
And maybe even challenges us to be more open to the possibility that someone who might not have excelled in the past could still have an incredible future ahead of them.
So in his 1995 paper, Torrance very briefly touches on a whole host of other fascinating insights that also faced questioning or were largely ignored.
Oh, he had so many interesting ideas.
We don't have time to delve deeply into all 15 of them today, but I think it's really worthwhile to just give a quick overview of a few more, just to illustrate the breadth of his challenges to those commonly held beliefs.
Yeah, it really gives you a sense of how he was constantly pushing the boundaries of our understanding of creativity and how he was never afraid to question the status quo.
So one of the things he found is that creativity tests might actually be less economically and racially biased than many other standardized tests, particularly when administered early in life.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, he was actually challenging this widespread assumption that all standardized tests inherently reflect cultural biases.
So he was saying that creativity tests might actually be a more fair and equitable way to assess potential, especially for young children from diverse backgrounds.
Right, and he made a strong case for the importance of actually actively motivating individuals during creativity tests.
That's interesting because the common practice is to maintain those very neutral testing conditions.
Right, but he was arguing that that doesn't necessarily skew the results, and that actually motivating individuals can actually lead to more accurate assessments of their creative abilities.
I like that. It makes sense. If you're more engaged and interested in the task, you're more likely to put forth your best effort.
And he proposed that individuals actually perform better on creativity tests when they're in a state of arousal, meaning engaged and stimulated rather than relaxed or stressed.
So it's not about being completely zen.
Right. It's about being alert and energized.
That makes sense. You need a little bit of that nervous energy to really get those creative juices flowing.
He also critiqued the standard methodology of evaluating educational programs by conducting pre- and post-testing at students' peak and off-peak times of year.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
He argued that this can lead to very inaccurate conclusions about the effectiveness of creativity training.
Yeah, because students' performance can fluctuate so much depending on all sorts of factors, like their energy levels, their motivation, even the time of day.
Right, so it's not always a reliable way to measure the true impact of an intervention. And interestingly, he observed that children from disadvantaged backgrounds might actually outperform more affluent or conventionally gifted students in brainstorming activities and in their ability to creatively improvise with everyday materials.
Wow.
So this really challenged that assumption that those groups are always at a disadvantage in creative tasks.
That's a really important point because it suggests that creativity can flourish in all sorts of environments and that we shouldn't be limiting our expectations based on socioeconomic status.
He also emphasized the long-term nature of creative achievement. So he pointed out that the predictive power of creativity test scores, it evolves over time, and that factors like intrinsic motivation and persistence become increasingly critical predictors of long-term creative success.
So it's not just about that initial spark of creativity, it's about the ability to sustain that spark over time.
Right, and he even suggested that what appears to be procrastination might actually serve as a valuable period of incubation that can ultimately enhance creativity.
Whoa.
Yeah, so this goes against the common belief that procrastination is simply a bad habit.
Right. It suggests that maybe there's something more to it, that maybe it's a necessary part of the creative process for some people.
And then, regarding intelligence, he found that individuals who are highly creative, but not necessarily exceptionally high in IQ, often achieve greater levels of creative output than those with very high IQs who are less inclined towards creative thinking.
Hmm. That makes me think of all those brilliant but uninspired people who never quite reach their full potential.
Right. It's like you need both the raw intellectual horsepower and the creative spark to really make a significant contribution.
And sometimes that spark can be even more important than the horsepower.
He also identified the phenomenon known as the fourth grade slump in creativity. So this is the tendency for measured creativity to actually decline around that age.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what causes that.
Yeah, there are a lot of theories about it. Some say it's because children become more self-conscious at that age, more concerned with fitting in. Others say it's because they're starting to get more pressure to conform to academic standards. But whatever the cause, it's a real phenomenon that Torrance documented.
And it highlights the importance of nurturing creativity in children throughout their development, not just in those early years.
Right. And he questioned the common practice of frequently adjusting originality scores on creativity tests based on factors like group affiliation, cultural background, or gender. So he was essentially arguing that we should be measuring creativity in a more objective way without letting those external factors influence our judgment.
That makes sense. It's about focusing on the quality of the ideas themselves, not on who generated them.
Right. He highlighted the critical need for mentors among disadvantaged children. So he argued that they often need this kind of guidance even more than their more affluent peers, but they're often less likely to have access to it.
Yeah, it's a real equity issue.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the importance of creating opportunities for all children to connect with mentors who can support their creative development.
He also found that a willingness to respectfully disagree within a group setting can actually foster greater creativity and lead to more effective decision-making.
That's counterintuitive. You often hear about the importance of consensus and harmony in groups.
Right, but Torrance was arguing that a little bit of healthy debate can actually be beneficial because it can challenge assumptions and lead to new and better ideas.
And of course, it's all about how that disagreement is handled. It has to be done respectfully and with the goal of finding the best solution, not just winning an argument.
Right. And he even explored the capacity of young children to learn and effectively apply negotiation skills.
That's fascinating. I wouldn't have thought that young children would have the cognitive ability to negotiate effectively.
Well, it turns out they do. And it's a skill that can be incredibly valuable throughout life, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, it's all about learning to communicate your needs and interests in a way that's assertive but not aggressive, and finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
And finally, he suggested that creatively gifted children who also have learning disabilities can achieve very remarkable success if their unique strengths are recognized and actively supported.
Yeah, that's a really powerful message of hope and inclusion.
So it challenges the limiting belief that learning disabilities inherently preclude high levels of achievement.
It's about seeing the whole child, recognizing their strengths, and finding ways to help them overcome their challenges.
So as we conclude this deep dive into just a few of E. Paul Torrance's questioned and often overlooked insights, I think the central message that emerges is a powerful reminder that the journey of truly original ideas, especially in a field as multifaceted as creativity, is rarely a smooth or universally embraced one.
It's often a long and winding road.
It often involves significant skepticism, considerable resistance, and sometimes even outright dismissal along the way.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage and perseverance to keep pushing those boundaries and challenging those established ways of thinking.
And Torrance himself understood this reality. He actively encouraged other researchers to take up these questions, to develop new methodologies for exploring these ideas further, to conduct rigorous longitudinal studies, and to continue experimenting. He knew that his work was often laying the groundwork for future inquiry.
Yeah, he was a true pioneer.
So we end with a final thought for you, our listener. Take a moment to consider these challenged insights within the context of your own life and your own areas of interest. Are there widely accepted truths in your field or even in your personal life that might be worth a second look? Are there assumptions that, if you dared to question them, could potentially unlock new possibilities or lead to a deeper level of understanding? Perhaps one of the most creative acts we can undertake is the willingness to challenge the status quo and to look beyond that very familiar landscape of conventional wisdom.
It's about being curious, being open-minded, and never stopping asking questions.
And who knows, you might just uncover some hidden gems of insight that have been waiting to be rediscovered.
That's the beauty of the creative journey. There's always something new to learn and explore.